All right. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the September 2024 chapter meeting for Monroe County's MCNOW. This is our 7th meeting this year, so we have one more, as well as our elections coming up. If you would like to see the agenda, I will share the link to that here. Hopefully it finally worked correctly. Every time I try, it seems that something goes wrong, but it should be there. We are going to have brief reports from our board because we want to be open and transparent as possible, and it helps you figure out what it is that we've been doing and where we could use some help. So I will start. This has been very busy summer for us, which you might not have known, but we've been very focused on working with allied groups like HAP and the League of Women Voters and trying to get people registered to vote and getting the message out that people need to vote, as well as the normal stuff we do, trying to have speakers and talk to our membership and get people involved. And of course, Pride events have been going on that we've been trying to participate in, as well as NAACP events. I think that's really all I have to report. Natalia, do you have anything you want to report on?
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Natalia Galvin. I'm the vice president, and I am spearheading our two grants, our GOTV grant, and we're winding down the grant we received for the city for safety. GOTV is going very well. Our press releases will be out or submitted out next week. We are doing free ride to the polls again for any Monroe County resident that would like it. You don't have to have any proof of voting because we can't do that. But if you want to go to if you want to go downtown for early voting and want to ride back, we will have those ready by the start of early voting on the 8th. We've been very busy with GOTV, getting our posters out in the community. We are super excited to co-sponsor with a lot of awesome organizations, both at IU and in the community. So those posters are available on our website. We also are happy to mail them or send them out to you. But that is kind of a wrap up for me on GOTV. We're, just kind of excited to get our text messages out and contact voters or contact residents and make sure we have a robust turnout this election, which I imagine we will. So, okay, I'll pass the baton to whoever wants to go next.
Tammy Jo, you're muted.
Yes, I'm on the phone with Aubrey right at this moment, so I have to work out getting her into the meeting. So
okay.
I think you're next, Mandy.
Sure. Just adding on to what Natalia was saying about the Uber rides, I have set those up, and as soon as I'm off of speaking, I will go find the code and just post it in the chat. That will be available to everyone in the county. Other than that, we do need some volunteers for our Spencer Pride tabling. This is right before voter registration ends, so we would really like to be able to be there so that we can register as many voters as possible right before the deadline. And I will also find that sign up link and post it. All right, I'm passing the baton.
That's me. I'm Julie Hardesty. I'm the membership director for the Monroe County MCNOW chapter. And I just have a little spiel that I always do. If you were a current member, we do send out reminders via email for membership renewal, so you can watch for that. Membership is available on a sliding scale from $10 to $40 per year, whatever works for you, no questions asked. If you want to sign up for a new membership, we do have a membership form. It's a Google form, and that will take you through the steps. And I can put that member sign up here in the chat. If you are a new member, you are eligible for a complimentary Monroe County MCNOW t-shirt while our supplies last. Mandy Yates, who is our treasurer, who just spoke, has our current supply, and we will hook you up as best we can. So you can contact me or Mandy to inquire about that. And you can always email me if you have any sort of questions or things you would like to talk about regarding membership. That is the membership email. And as of September 18th, our chapter is currently at 52 chapter members. So that is what I have.
Okay, thank you. I believe Aubrey is here. Though for some reason it says my name under, I don't know why. Oh, I bet I know. It's because she used my link. I couldn't find the generic link. Okay. Okay. Well, this is why it's a volunteer organization, folks. This is how these things work. All right, close my door so my family can't make noises. All right. So I just want to mention before we get started with tonight's topic that we have 2 future meetings that I want you to make note of because I hope you will participate in them. The first is next month, October 24th. We are going to have our Understanding Others interactive meeting. And this grew out of the survey that we sent out earlier, you might remember, asking about what members wanted, what they're interested in, how they were interacting with us. And so at this meeting, we're going to do some things that will hopefully help us build more strength as an organization and also be a way for us to learn about each other so that issues which we believe we are tackling through our core issues, we're actually also tackling within our organization internally. So I hope people will come to that. And then thinking way far ahead to next year, because you have to do this if you partner with IU Cinema, March 13th, 2025, we will be showing Girls State, which is a documentary that came out earlier this year. We're going to have a Q&A session with the director and at least one of the young women featured in it. And in November, I'm going to start approaching some other groups, see if they would like to co-sponsor with us. But almost everything is done except for that. And so I hope people come to that. I will be there. Even if I'm not reelected as president, I will still be there because I created this, so I need to be there. So let's look at our topic tonight. Let me give a little bit of background. So we're going to have a conversation, a Q&A session with some of the local news media in our area. I started putting this together in March 2024 this year. And I want to tell you why, so you appreciate the 3 people who have come today, because they are doing something quite brave. They're talking to us and anyone else about their work in the news. My husband comes from a news family. His grandfather was the publisher of a local newspaper. His father was a journalism professor. He was the head of the department at South Dakota State University. He also created major programs to try to get more Indigenous people into news reporting because he felt that they were underrepresented and misunderstood in part because none of them were in the field doing the work. So for my husband, that's really important part. I just grew up with a daily newspaper, like every single day in my hometown. And I read it cover to cover and my parents would talk to me about it. So the news is really important to me. And you may have noticed that there have been some changes in the past decade, 2 decades, to news outlets that we have available to us in which we can see. I approached 19 different news agencies. I heard from 2 others that are not here tonight with us. One was the Herald Times, and then other was WBIW. And they both wanted to participate, but they had to pull out for various reasons I don't want to get into. Another one, the Brown County Democrat, sent this statement that I will read to you. It is from Tim Timison, who's our intern editor. And he says, as a matter of record, I can share with you today that BC Democrat has no policy against reporting on any of the topics you listed. So I listed our 6 core topics when I first reached out to news agencies. Our intent with news coverage is to accurately and fairly report on news and events in Brown County. Any biases or prejudice would have no place in this or any other newsroom I know of. The newspaper is part of the AIM Media Indiana. So tonight we have 3 wonderful people who've come here out of those 19 to talk to us, to take our questions. They had to deal with enormous amount of questions I gave them just to start. But at any point, if someone has another question, raise your hand if you want to say it verbally or put it in the chat, and I promise we will get to them. I will not monopolize the whole time. So we have Rodney Margison from Bloom Magazine, Ron Eid from Limestone Post, and Aubrey Wright for WFIU WTIU. All right, would you each briefly introduce yourself and tell them what you do for your news agencies?
Yeah,
All
I
right,
can go first. Oh, sorry.
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everybody. I'm Aubrey Wright. Like she said, I work for WFIU, WTIU. I'm actually a higher education reporter, so I think the other speakers are editors, but I have been in this role for about a year. So if you don't know WTIU, WFIU, we are the local NPR and PBS station. Sometimes I say PBR station, so to catch myself there. But yeah, it's a public media.
All right, I'll go. I'm Rodney. I'm with Bloom Magazine. I've been there coming up on 8 years. I'm the managing editor. About 85% of what I do is managing, which is juggling things. About 10% is editing and 5% is writing and taking pictures.
Thank you. Ron?
I am Ron Eid. I am the publisher of Limestone Post magazine. We are an online-only publication based here in Bloomington. We feature in-depth stories about the community, Bloomington and the surrounding communities, but I have a feeling I'll be getting more into that in a minute.
Yeah. Oh, thank you each. So to help us get to know you a little bit better, let's start something with really basic. What motivated each of you to get into journalism, and how many years have you been a journalist? Would you like to start, Aubrey?
Yeah, I'm afraid of establishing the precedent of going first for every question. I have to have good answers.
I'll mix it up next time.
I thank you for sending this over. I have a smart reason and I have a dumb reason. So my dumb reason is that I really loved rom-coms growing up, and journalism is in like every rom-com ever. Nora Ephron was a journalist. So yeah, we got a representation there. But my smart reason is that I grew up in a small town in Ohio. I'm from a Fox News family, but I always leaned a little bit further left. I was super interested in politics. And I remember in high school, I don't mean to make anybody feel old, but in high school, Donald Trump was elected. You know, there were major protests, like the start of the Black Lives Matter movement. So I was just getting involved in politics, and I was like, there has to be more than Tucker Carlson. So I started reading a little bit more, and yeah, it just came from my love of reading about, you know, activists and about people who are trying to make changes.
Thank you. Ron, how did you get into journalism, and how long have you been in journalism?
Well, I actually got a business degree from IU and tried that out for about 8 years, and it just wasn't doing it for me. I think, like a lot of people, like a lot of journalists, I just had this curiosity about what was going on in the world around me, how things worked, not from like an engineering standpoint, but you know, that was part of it. But a curiosity about how things work. A lot like Aubrey, it's wanting to know things, wanting to being a storyteller, explaining things, a sense of wanting to do something about the injustice that we see all around us and things like that. So I got my master's degree in journalism in Texas in the 90s, and I've been doing it pretty much since then. So for 30 years, I wasn't always an editor, but I started as a freelance writer and then actually worked at Bloom for about 7 years. So Rodney, you've got me beat by almost 2 years now in that position. So congratulations.
All right. Rodney, what motivated you to go into journalism and how long have you been doing it?
My motivation was kind of threefold. Just growing up with daily newspapers all the time, reading the newspaper, that was just a thing in our family. My dad was a photographer. And so from a very early age, I realized that that was kind of what I wanted to do. But then the thing that really solidified it was Watergate, and seeing how journalists held the powerful accountable, and so that combined with the photography experience or the photography element, and then the daily newspapers made me want to become a photojournalist. And so that's what I actually started out as, was strictly a photojournalist, and off and on for the past 40 years technically, but the past 20 years almost consistently, that's what I've been doing. I ended up at the Brown County Democrat, coincidentally, about 20 years ago, and ended up learning more about the writing element of it and editing, and that's just sort of how I got to where I am. So ultimately, that desire to speak for the people, to inform the people of what those in power are doing, that sort of was the underlying element of getting into journalism.
Thank you. I hear a lot of similarities between your stories, but also, differences. It seems like you had a love and a desire to learn. And I think that's really cool. I can relate to that. I'm sure many of us can. So Ron, what types of stories or what sorts of investigations do you really like to work on?
Well, we cover a lot of different things. What's so great about Bloomington is it's such a dynamic community. There are a lot of different things going on. We have a lot of issues and challenges as well as a community. So it's really, but we have so many people engaged in trying to work on those things. So it's really gratifying to see what people are doing, what the initiatives they're doing to see if they'll work or not, and plus what other communities are doing. A lot of our issues aren't unique to us. So communities like us are trying different things. What are they doing? Are those working? Would they work here? Why or why not? So it's sort of that curiosity and figuring out how things work, and it's the humanitarian aspect of it too, because so many people care about other people in this community that it's just I don't want to say it's fun to go to work to do that, but it's always invigorating.
All right. Aubrey, what kind of stories do you like to cover?
Yes. If totally ignoring what my editors want, what people will probably actually read. I love like the squishy, heartfelt people stories. I love when someone has just like such a strong way of like telling what they've been through, or sometimes when they're like a quirky personality and you just like want to pick every single quote that they have. But can't always do that. So I like to try to kind of loop in something relevant, which is what all journalists are supposed to do. Something relevant, something fact-based to make the story a little more of like a hard news story.
Ah, all right. Thank you. Rodney, what kind of stories do you like to cover?
Based on my past, I really enjoy political stories. I enjoy, not that I do that much now, but investigative journalism. There's something about doing a deep dive into stuff like that is very satisfying to me. And on the flip side of that, I like feel good people stories, survivor stories, success stories, people that have stories about people who have overcome challenges, and come out on top.
All right, thank you. So from what your backgrounds are and what you each like to work with, let's talk more about your actual agencies that you work for and work with. Um, do they consider themselves to be local, regional, or national in their coverage and outreach? Rodney, what does Bloom Magazine consider itself to be?
I would call us local, maybe even hyper local. Very seldom do we cover anything that has anything to do with outside Monroe County. So,
All right. Ron, what about Limestone?
We it's in our tagline. We cover Monroe and the surrounding counties. We feel like that there's so much going on, and some of our more popular stories are more the human interest stories in Southern Indiana. You might call them travel stories or destination stories or whatever, but yeah, our issues oriented stories are primarily Monroe County.
And Aubrey, does WTIU, WFIU, do they see themselves as regional, local, national?
Yeah, I know our name is just such a mouthful, isn't it? I think we consider ourselves regional. We do mostly focus on Monroe County. I cover higher ed, so I mostly cover Indiana University and Ivy Tech because they're right here. We have some reporters who will do national stories. Like we have a guy who covers every execution, prisons and stuff. So he does some nationally things, but yes, mostly regional.
Okay. Aubrey, I'm gonna stick with you. So how do you gauge what your viewers and your listeners want you to cover? And do they seem to want soft or hard news or a mixture?
Well, okay, I'm sure every other journalist understands. I think people do mostly want hard news. Like I feel like a story that I write in 3 seconds about a car crash will always get more views than like a 3-month investigative piece. But we do have like our online metrics. We check our socials. We try to make it as easy as possible for people to give us tips, to give us suggestions. Our email's always open. And something that is kind of harder for a lot of younger journalists because we're so online. It's literally just talking to people when you show up to an event, which like you wouldn't believe how hard it is for some people to do that. Like just be like, oh, hey, why are you here at this public hearing? Oh, what is this like for you? Literally, what would you like us to do? So those are kind of ways that we try to be open to these suggestions.
Oh, good. Rodney, how do you gauge what your readers want you to cover? And would you say it's hard or soft news?
I'd say most of what we cover is soft. We gauge that because we're constantly getting story ideas from readers, from advertisers, from people. Well, I guess they would be readers, people that we just bump into. And most of those are kind of like front of the book stories, the shorter, 1 page and a half stories just about a person or an event or a business or whatever. And then as far as our longer feature stories in the back of the book, some of those come from tips, some of those come from combinations of tips that we kind of find a common element and piece together. And a lot of them come from just ideas that we've seen that we feel speaks to the community, that maybe something bigger that we can localize. So, but mostly it's just tips that we get from our readers and advertisers.
Okay, great. And Ron, since Limestone, you said is mostly online, I'm sure you use analytics when you're gauging what your readers want, but you may use other things as well. How do you determine what they want you to cover, and would you classify it as soft or hard news?
They will tell us. They will tell us what we should be covering in a lot of cases, and we will pursue that to see if it fits in our editorial scheme. But we try to cover everything that comes across the desk. We also we are 90% freelance written, and our excuse me, I knew that frog would show up. We are 90% freelance written, and our contributors represent a really broad cross section of the community. So they are bringing theirs. They're out there. They have they're hearing things, or seeing things, or involved in things, and they bring ideas to me and ask, "Can we do this?" And we might work back and forth to narrow it or broaden it or whatever. And I'd say we feature in-depth stories. So a lot of those are really lengthy and complex and complicated stories, but I know that I don't want to read those every time. So I like to include a mix of soft and hard stories. But some of the softer stories will take off right away, and they'll do really well with metrics and views and things like that. But it's our in-depth stories that I'm really proud of, because they're kind of evergreen. A lot of them are evergreen. We did stories in 2016 that are still being read today. And I don't know how or where these things get picked up. I'm not that good at analytics, so someone else could probably show me, but I think they're getting the links are getting posted somewhere, and I'll see a spike in the water quality story, or in whatever story. So it's and I think that's attributed to how our writers cover a story with these more in-depth stories, because they will bring in different perspectives. They will have a lot of points of view. They will do history of the topic and in context and things like that. So even though some of the data might be outdated, like in the water quality story, a lot of it is still relevant today. So people are getting value out of it. Does that answer all the questions? Was there another part to that?
No, I think that was great. And actually, you all kind of touched upon another question I had, which was, how do you decide what to look into? So we'll kind of skip down to, so if you're getting these suggestions, or maybe you have an assigned beat, so you watch and you respond to things, what do you do, meaning your publishers, your editors, to make sure you're covering a wide range of opinions? When you go out and research and then you write this and publish it, how do you ensure that you're getting that wider range of opinions that are part of public discord, particularly when it seems like more and more people are turning to news sources, or sources in general, that seem to just parrot back what they already say? Rodney, would you like to start?
That's a tough question, and I think if it's most of the stories that we publish, they just really don't have multiple sides. If it is something bigger, we try to get different perspectives, but honestly, I can't say that we try to get different viewpoints. I think the perspectives come from within the same angle, but we may not go outside that bubble to try and get an opposing viewpoint. And I think that's kind of the benefit, if you want to call it that, of working for a magazine like this, is because as far as a news source, I think we're low on that scale. I think we're more entertainment, lifestyle, culture, that kind of thing, information provider rather than a news provider. And so I think we have the benefit of being able to not have to tell all sides of a story. We can kind of angle it in the way that we feel that our readers might get more out of it. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I think the format, you each have a slightly different format, and where you're publishing, what you're focusing on is different. So I think that makes a lot of sense that, you know, the opinions you're going to look for or the different perspectives. But Aubrey, what, what do you guys do at the radio station and the TV station to try to get as many perspectives or opinions on a story as possible?
Yeah, I think sometimes it's important for maybe like something important that a non-journalist should know is that just because a perspective isn't in a story doesn't mean that we didn't try. I think the first step of reporting any kind of story, especially one that should be balanced with a bunch of different opinions, is reaching out to as many people as possible. And I'm willing to bet a lot of journalists are doing that because if you follow like the Society of Professional Journalists guidelines, try to be fair, accurate, balanced. We also track our sources. So sometimes that might mean like, oh, like we've had a lot of old white guys. So who is like the younger person, or maybe someone who could bring like a BIPOC perspective in it. So we try to do things like that, just beyond like a political identity. But I will say, I mean, like sometimes it's hard. I'm not gonna lie, especially when you're on a deadline, or especially when people might be mistrustful of the news.
Yeah. Ron, so how do you try to get different perspectives, or do you, for the pieces that you put in Limestone?
We do. We have an advantage over both Bloom and WFIU, WTIU, is that we don't have a production schedule. We don't have a printer schedule that we have to have everything uploaded by a certain date. Those were some late nights and headaches from my Bloom days. And we don't have a programming schedule either. So, if we can't post something on Thursday because we're waiting for a quote, or we need to get a different quote, then it's nothing lost really. But we do try to, if a story comes in and an accusation is made or a claim is made, then we will go to the writer. We will tell the writer, we need to get a response from that other side, whoever that's, whether it's a person or an organization or even a point of view. We need to get a response from that. And we get the same, problems that Aubrey gets, is sometimes they don't want to talk to us. It's happening more and more that some people just don't want to talk to the media because they don't have to. They can go to social media and express their opinion, whether it's true or not, and we'll probably get into this in a little bit too, but all we can do is try. And so that's where we are.
Great. So Rodney, let's turn to the concept of news deserts. So for people who don't know, a news desert happens when the people in an area, be it a city, a town, a county, or a region, lack access to like local news, like reporting on what is actually going on where they live, or news that they can trust to be objective or to reveal the facts. And I think all three of you could jump in and talk on this. You don't need to wait for each other because this is more of a conversation question here. Why do you think this is happening? Why are these news deserts developing? Because, I mentioned growing up with a daily newspaper. That's now a monthly newspaper in my small hometown. That's crazy to me. I just turned 55. That's crazy. When I was 20, it was still a daily newspaper. So why do you think this is happening?
It actually is sickening to see that it is happening. I mean, as just a a newspaper journalist at heart, it's so sad. I think it's money. That's the number one reason, money. The advertising revenue for newspapers peaked in the early 2000s, and it's gone down since. And people were greedy and thought that it should stay where it was. And then the internet boomed and they were losing even more revenue. And so hedge funds came in and bought newspaper chains and bought other newspaper chains and decided that they were going to streamline everything. And I mean, locally, you look at the HT. I mean, they went from this massive staff that was doing a great job of covering the community and the surrounding areas, and now they're down to what, like 5 people. And it all comes down, in my opinion, it comes down to money, and the people who are running those newspapers aren't journalists. They're pardon the expression, they're bean counters, and all they want is the bottom line, and they don't have any sense of community. And I think that journalism is a calling. Sorry about the cat that keeps showing up in the picture there. They don't have any sense of what journalism means to a community, that it's actually a commodity that's important to a community. All they care about is the money.
Yeah, to give more specifics, to Rodney and I were both at a summit yesterday about local news, and they had some people from outside the community talk about it. But it has been researched and studied, and Rodney's exactly right. I mean, it actually happened with Craigslist in the early 2000s. Newspapers, a lot of their revenue was from classified ads, and that just went away almost overnight. Well, I don't remember the number, Rodney. Was like $2 billion that Craigslist
something like that, yeah,
took away from newspapers, and that's a hard thing to make up for. And then Google and Facebook came along right after that, right on the heels of that, and now they have like 70% of the online digital advertising, which took away from the print advertising. And so it has been a very quick descent. Like Ronnie said, the HT had, when I moved back here in the mid 2000s, the HT had 30 reporters, and now they're down to 5 or 6 or something like that. And I've talked to Jill Bond. She actually wrote an editorial for Limestone Post about the situation that the HT is in. That editorial actually got first place in the SPJs, which is the Society of Professional Journalists Best in Indiana Awards. And I was afraid to tell her because she wrote about Gannett and the HT and got first place, kind of criticizing them. I told her, I hope you don't get in trouble for this, but you won first place. But she knows, she's well aware of it. She's doing the best she can, and the reporters there are doing the best they can with the resources they're given. They're just not given enough. And as far as a news desert, we're kind of lucky. We're not in a news desert because we have all these different outlets here in town, from Bloom to WFIU to the B Square, Limestone Post, Jeremy Hogan, different things, but it's fragmented, and that does not build cohesiveness in a community. And our readers tell us that is their biggest complaint, is that they have to go over here for a story and then over here for another story. It's not like in a daily roundup thing. And this was talked about a lot yesterday at this summit. Yeah.
I think from a younger perspective, I totally agree with everything that's been said. But I know people don't want to pay for their news anymore. I mean, I get so much of my news 100% free from social media. Or maybe, they're just reading the headline, so they don't click on the story, so they don't view the ad online or something like that. But I think that, yeah, it's all about money. I mean, the problem that journalism has is the problem that every industry has, which is that people want to make money, and the people who are doing a lot of the work aren't getting the money. But yeah, I mean, I think you're very lucky that your town actually has a monthly paper and it hasn't totally been cut. I've worked at some dying newspapers, and it's just like a vicious cycle.
Yeah, I know when I hear people talking about the news here, it seems like everyone complains about how they don't have enough local news. But then to build on what you said, they are doing that. They're looking for how can they get the free story? How can they get the free information? And ultimately it comes down to you get what you pay for, right? If you want quality, you have to have quality people. And why would quality people do the investigations and the writing if they can't actually afford an apartment or buy food or support a family? And I hear you, I'm a writer, I write books and short stories and essays, but it's the same thing. The number of people who just think I have magic backpack of books that I can just give away at a moment's notice. So you mentioned that we're not really in a news desert here, and I would agree, though a lot of people complain about the quality of the news in Bloomington. Do you think that local news can be saved? Local and regional news can be saved, or are we seeing the death of objective journalism? Um,
Yeah,
Ron,
I
what do
sure
you
hope
think?
it can.
Oh, yeah, go
Sorry.
ahead.
No, you can go ahead, Ron.
Well, a lot of people are working on it. We started as a for-profit in 2015, but I had my finger to the wind and I saw which way things were going. But I also noticed that there was a lot of momentum toward funding local news sources from the big funders like the MacArthur Foundation and the Knight Foundation, and they were, focused on local news because it's been studied for, since the dawn of the internet, what is going to happen. And it is not pretty when a community does become a legit news desert, like we see in a lot of our surrounding counties. And because we're not on an island, we're affected by what goes on in surrounding counties. And if they're in a news desert, they're not getting the information, then that's going to affect us. It affects community engagement. It affects voter turnout. It affects government corruption, business corruption. All these things tend to increase when, well, not increase, but get worse when there isn't a local news source to, like Rodney says, hold power to account, hold people accountable, business leaders, decision makers, government leaders, and things like that. And there are, Aubrey is such an inspiration. I'm so glad to see young people still interested in getting the truth out there, and objective journalism. I mean, objective journalism is a goal, you're never going to reach it. But it's always something to strive for. And it is being produced out there a lot. The problem is finding it. Like, Aubrey's smart enough, she gets her news from social media. Well, she knows what the reliable sources are. She knows when, or she can find out if something has been faked or tampered with or skewed or just slightly wrong. She has the skills to find, to discern misinformation from more factual reporting. And I think that's what's going to be the challenge for readers and everyday citizens, is figuring out, and we're losing right now because there is so much misinformation out there, and who knows what challenges AI is how that's gonna complicate things. So I'm hopeful, I'm optimistic, just because I see the talented writers coming up through the journalism school here and getting their start. And we work with some of them. The Arnault Center for Investigative Journalism at IU is an incredible source. So I'm hopeful.
I echo what Ron said, really. But I think, yeah, hit on it. It's trust. The public doesn't trust the media. It doesn't matter how objective somebody is being, the public's trust, it seems like their default is it's subjective. And I think that all goes back to what they've become accustomed to watching or listening or reading, the things that really are deeply slanted in one direction or another. And so they just sort of put all of us in that same basket of mistrust. I think the secret is to earn the trust again. You know, back in the day, whatever that means, you know, journalists were trusted. You didn't hear anything about, I mean, very seldom. Did you hear anything about, you know, stories in the newspaper or on television being false? And now it seems like the default is that everybody thinks that they are until proven otherwise. So somehow we've got to rein that in and rebuild trust with the public that what we're doing is actually in their best interest and not for our best interest.
I have so many notes from this question, Tammy Joe. I like I need to reel myself in. But you know, my answer is yes, I do think it could be saved. I think that the future of news is not going to look, you know, like a daily newspaper. I think it's going to be much more digital. I think it's going to be meeting the audience where it is, whether it be through newsletters, whether it be through social media. You know, I know people are setting up in coffee shops. You know, my old job, I was at a library for like 2 months just waiting for people to come to me. So I think it's going to be more creative. And like I work with Report for America. I think we mentioned like MacArthur. There is really a lot of funding specifically for young journalists to get their start and to help local news. Because it's so important for building a sense of community. It's so important to know what is going on in your home. Like, this is my home. Like, this is my home. I don't live in New York. I don't fly in when there's something exciting happening. You know, like, I'm paying taxes here. I'm invested in these people. And I think any local journalist will say that. So it's scary to think that that value could be gone, but I think we're gonna get there. I'm hopeful.
Oh, good. You guys give me some hope then. So those are my questions that I gave them ahead of time, everyone. And the members might be thinking, but Tammy Joe, where are our 6 issues in all your questions? And I'm going to be honest with you. I tried repeatedly to write some, and I just went, yeah, your father-in-law is going to bump you on the head because these are in no way, shape, or form neutral questions. They very much represent the viewpoint of myself and to a large extent of this chapter and the national organization. So please, everyone else, feel free to ask questions now. And if you don't have to be objective, so you can ask any question you want.
Oh, I do have a question. I was actually wondering, Aubrey, if you could talk a little bit more about Report for America. I'm not familiar with that, but it looks really intriguing.
Yes, I would love to. Report for America, it's mostly geared toward early career journalists, but as layoffs are happening, if you paid attention to the news industry, a lot of older journalists are kind of getting their second chance at working in news. But basically, it places journalists in local newsrooms that need help paying for their positions. So Report for America, I think it covers half of my salary for the first year, and then it slowly decreases over 3 years. And so the point is that newsrooms can build up enough funding to keep this reporter there. It's like little like training wheels to help them afford more staff, basically.
Natalia has a question. Are there any additional challenges to cover IU right now, especially with such late protests, the new rules, etc.?
Oh yeah. I think Rodney, you unmuted though. So would you like to go? Or
Oh,
am
I've
I
been
Hi
unmuted.
blind.
You're,
Oh,
you're
okay.
fine. You're fine. I'm just too lazy to hit the button.
I'm too noisy to do that. Yeah, there are. Um, so much is going on. I mean, having enough time in a day is a challenge always. Having enough people, there are vigils Sunday nights at like 10 p.m. I'm not working at 10 p.m. on a weekend. But thankfully, we do have the staff to have someone out there. So, like, that is just a stressor. And then obviously, trying to, again, be fair, accurate, balanced when it's such a charged issue and it's personal for a lot of people, especially when you're just focusing on the protests, on maybe someone's professor being told that they could be fired, or like someone who works in my building being told that they could be fired. It's a very tenuous situation. It's always keeping us busy.
Anyone else have questions?
I have one more. It's kind of a selfish question. So we're going to get our press releases out for GOTV and free Ubers to the polls. If you could give like civic organizations and community organizations like ours any kind of guidance in what like writing a great press release that would make your lives easier, instead, like what's a good like a rule of thumb for writing press releases that could, be a good fit for your publications?
As far as Bloom goes, timing is everything. We sent our October-November issue to the printer today, and so this afternoon we started working on December-January. So we've got like a 2-month lead time. The beginning of September was pretty much the deadline for anything to get into October. But that said, short and concise, the who, what, when, where, why, how. We don't need a whole lot of fluff. We just want the information. Because we're probably going to, if it's something that we're going to run, we have a section in the front of the magazine now called Upfront, and it's just anywhere from like 3 to 6 or 7 briefs that are about 130 words a piece. If it's something that we can run up there, then that's all we're going to run is like 130 words. We just sort of take a press release and adapt it and put it in there. And there's a lot of competition for that space. And sometimes we have to fight with what space we have available as to how many things we can get in. But short and sweet and answering those questions are what we're looking for.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. We have a similar problem with lead time, but don't get discouraged just because you don't see something from us after you send a press release. Doesn't mean we haven't read it and we're not considering it for maybe a larger story. I wrote the note about GoTV. I want to know more about that, and the rides to the polls thing sounds great, especially with, it might be something. I'm not going to say we're going to do this because it's almost too late for us right now, but there was a state legislator who presented a law, wrote a law for the state that doesn't allow people to do that. I think there was a group in Indianapolis that was taking people to the polls, and he said, no, we can't have that happen, even though it happens in his county in southern Indiana in a different form. So that would be a great story that we would love to write about that. And this would be a perfect addition or an example, especially with a local angle. So my point is, don't get discouraged. I think most people read these press releases, even if they don't act on them.
Yeah, I have one sitting in my inbox right now that I need to respond to. I guess I would say, as someone with like a broadcast station, if you need to, ideally you would have someone available to interview or provide like a soundbite over like a phone call. I guess that's kind of the biggest thing that we look out for. Or maybe I think Ron might have mentioned this, but tying in like a useful fact, like, oh, 20,000 people in our county miss out on voting because they don't have a ride, or 50% say that's the biggest barrier. So if you can kind of like loop in like a problem that you're solving, that might be useful.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with Natalia. That is very helpful because, most of us are not professional journalists at all, or even come from families who have them. All right. Isabel asks, how independent are your publications in regard to advertisers and in regard to the university? So depending on your publication.
I can chime in. Oh, I'm
Go
sorry.
right ahead.
We keep
Nope.
doing this, Rodney. We are 100% independent from the university. I know that it can be kind of confusing because about 50% of NPR stations in the US are like their licenses are through a university. So like in the state, Notre Dame and Purdue, they have an NPR station, but they're also independent. But the only people who tell me what stories to do are my bosses. I don't even listen to other people in the news station, unfortunately. So what I'm saying is, like, yeah, Pamela Whitten's administration could never ever tell me what to do or influence a story that I do.
Ideally, I say that we are 100% independent. I don't make the final decisions on things though, so I would say 95% if you look at it realistically. But yeah, we take a look at the stories and we don't really worry that much about what somebody might say. If we hurt anybody's feelings, we certainly don't take a step back when it's the university at this point. In fact, we're trying to figure out how to be a little more aggressive with the university.
We are independent. We have to be independent. A lot of the grants we apply for require 100% independence. We have an editorial independence statement on our About Us page. We subscribe to the Society of Professional Journalists Code of Ethics, which is a long list of requirements such as that. But also we're a member of the Institute for Nonprofit News, and they have a pretty rigorous what's the term? Compliance structure that we have to meet every year. So they will go in and they will read our stories. They will look at our statements and our policies and things like that. And as a nonprofit, we have to do that for a number of reasons as well. So I'd say it's pretty rigorous requirement for us.
Thank you. Anyone else have a question?
Can I just follow up on that? Hi, this is Isabel.
Yeah.
So I heard on WFIU today about two people in WFIU, WTIU that are being fired or forced out or something. And I immediately was very concerned that this might have been political. And I don't know, Audrey, if you're comfortable speaking to it, but that would be a big concern.
Yeah, I will chime in with what I know. And we were told it's not a financial or a political reason. I don't even know if as journalists we're allowed to say they were fired. I think we phrased it as like forced to leave their jobs or and escorted out. But I can tell you 100% like we are editorially independent. And like honestly, it is a badge of honor for a journalist to be targeted for something that they covered. I'd probably win an award. I don't know a ton. Like we found out as soon as the public found out, and I knew someone was gonna ask me about it. But whatever you read is the information that we know. We've basically published everything.
Thank you.
So anyone else have a final question or two? Well, if no one does, I want to thank Aubrey, Rodney, and Ron for coming here tonight and for speaking with us and for dealing with my long list of questions I sent you in an email. I really appreciated your honest answers and your thoughtful answers. And while we didn't have like 100 people here, we will share this on our YouTube site so that you'll get more views and more people will see it. You know, it's always hard to plan any sort of meeting, right, in Bloomington, because there's something, there's usually like a half dozen things every night that's going on. So I greatly appreciate it. I know our board greatly appreciate it. And I'll just remind everyone that next month, October 24th, we're going to have our Understanding Others interactive meeting. I hope people come. I believe that we can make this a stronger chapter, but it is something we have to work on. And, you know, put it on your calendars. Girl State documentary, March 13th, 2025. Very excited about this. And if you have time on Saturday, October 5th, particularly from like 4 p.m. to 6:30 or so, we could use some help with the final couple hours at the Spencer Pride event and taking down the stuff and getting it back to either me or Mandy. Mandy, do you want to share that link again, just in case anyone should like to help out?
I could also-
Yes. Spencer
No.
Pride.
Yes, I can also mention that it's not really taking down a bunch of stuff. It's just clearing off the table. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no tent, there's no table.
No,
there's
okay, all right, cool. That's less
Stuff on
work
the
than it
table,
was
that's
at you know, Pride Fest here in Bloomington. That was like, oh my goodness, whose chair is this? Where did this chair come from? You know, I was like, is this our sign? What's this? All right, thank you everyone so much. Board, I will see you next week, I guess. Gee. And everyone, I'll be reading your publications and good luck. We look forward to your continued journalism and helping us understand our local community. All right,
Thank you
good
for
night,
having us.
everyone.
Thank you.